She wasn't supposed to feel anything. Not for him. Not in here. But power has a scent, and she had nothing left to lose. Tameka Ward walked like someone who had already lost everything and dared the world to take more. Her prison ID read, #728134J. But inmates and guards alike knew her by her name and her stare. At 30, she had survived a childhood of broken promises, a young adulthood of hustling miracles out of people's wallets, and a 5-year stretch already behind the concrete and coils of Georgia's Harrow Creek Correctional Facility. She wasn't born to this life. No one is, really, once upon a time, before steel doors and orange jumpsuits. Tamika sat in the front pew of New Vision Baptist Church every Sunday morning. Her grandmother, the only stable person she ever knew, raised her to quote scripture before she knew how to spell her own name. Tamika sang solos in the youth choir, quoted psalms on command, and gave out hugs that smelled like coconut oil and faith. But life has a way of trading hallelujahs for hustle. Her grandmother passed. Her mother relapsed. Bills piled up. The bank took the house. And God, it seemed, took his silence personally. By 22, Tamika had learned how to manipulate numbers and people, credit card schemes, check fraud, bank scams so clean they left accountants shaking their heads in disbelief. She didn't steal from the poor. She stole from the system. And for a while it felt like justice. Until it didn't. Her downfall was predictable. A partner flipped. A deal fell through. The feds came knocking. 10 years. No early parole. The girl who once sang hymns about redemption now cleaned cafeteria trays in a prison where forgiveness was just another lie whispered through bars. Warden Elijah Brooks had seen every kind of woman pass through Harrow Creek. The addicts, the fighters, the broken, and the bent. He ran the prison like a war camp, tight, disciplined, predictable. And he was good at it. Too good, maybe. Elijah was 47, a former Marine. Medals collected dust in his study. His name was mentioned in corrections conferences across the state. To his staff, he was a man of order. To his inmates, a shadow that moved in silence. A tall, trim figure in pressed uniforms and polished boots. Eyes that missed nothing. Smiles that never quite reached the soul. His wife, Delilah Brooks, completed the image. A church pianist with soft curls and softer words. She taught Bible study on Tuesdays, hosted charity galas on weekends, and served as a picture of grace in the local community. They had been married 20 years. No children. Just one large home with tall white columns and tall silences in between them. Elijah never cheated. Not with other women. Not with temptation. Not until her. It was a Tuesday morning when he first noticed her. Tamika was wiping down tables in the visitation wing. Her sleeves rolled, her mouth quietly humming something old and bluesy. Her motions were methodical, efficient, but it was her eyes that caught him. Not defiant like most, but amused. Like she was watching the world pretend to be something it wasn't. He walked past her without stopping. "Good morning, sir," she said, glancing up. Not a trace of sarcasm in her voice. Not exactly respectful either, just aware. He nodded, his footsteps echoing down the hall. But he remembered her voice. A week later, she was reassigned to administrative laundry, a privileged job, quiet, isolated, near his office. He didn't ask for her specifically, not out loud, but the thought had crawled somewhere deep and unspoken. She arrived 2 mornings later with her sleeves still rolled and her stare still sharp. "Didn't think warden types folded their own shirts," she teased, watching him pass by as she sorted staff uniforms into label bins. He said nothing, but he didn't stop her either. They began talking in fragments. Good morning here. A passing joke there. Then longer exchanges during late shift changes. She called him Bossman with a grin. He corrected her once, then didn't again. There was no flirting, not directly, just heat lingering in the quiet, electricity hiding under manners and schedules. One afternoon, she mentioned her favorite poet. "Elijah," she said, folding a press sheet, "you ever read Langston Hughes?" He paused, looked at her. "Not recently." "You should. He writes about dreams. Ones that dry up. You'd understand." Their eyes held for a moment too long. She turned away first, but he stood still. That night, he Googled Hughes. There were rules, boundaries, lines drawn so clearly even the devil wouldn't cross them. Warden Brooks knew every policy, every infraction code. He'd suspended guards for glancing too long at inmates, fired one for passing notes. He had built his reputation on being incorruptible, but that was before Tameka Ward, before the way her voice curled when she said his name, before he started seeing her not as a number, but as a woman, a real woman, with fire in her eyes and a story buried beneath sarcasm and bruised pride. She wasn't scared of him. That intrigued him more than it should have. He told himself it was nothing, a passing curiosity, a fascination with a mind that didn't bend under pressure. But late at night, when he returned home to Delilah humming gospel tunes and sipping tea in their sunroom, he began to feel something foreign. Regret? Guilt? No. Want. One evening, Tamika lingered after her shift. Everyone else was gone. The fluorescent lights buzzed. She stood by the doorway, arms crossed. "You ever wonder why they let us rot in here?" she asked softly. Elijah looked up from his desk. "You were convicted of a crime. So were a lot of men who got second chances. But women like me were easier to forget." He didn't reply. She turned to go. "I'm not asking for your sympathy," she added, hand on the doorknob. "Just maybe your attention." The door closed gently behind her, and something inside him broke open. Prisons don't just hold criminals. They hold secrets. And Harrow Creek was about to birth a lie that couldn't stay buried, one that would ruin a marriage and a life and change the meaning of justice forever. Because behind the badge, behind the silence, behind the bars, two people were already falling, and neither one knew how far. She was dangerous, not with a weapon, but with her eyes. What started as stolen glances became secret meetings. And somewhere between concrete walls and parole forms, a line was crossed that neither of them could erase. Warden Elijah Brooks had built his career on rules. Discipline, order, silence. Those were the pillars of Jackson Pines Correctional Facility, and the same ones he'd modeled his marriage after. He rose every day at 5 a.m., drank his coffee black, read a passage from Proverbs, kissed his wife Delilah on the cheek, and drove 45 minutes to a compound he treated like his own personal kingdom. But lately, the kingdom had begun to feel like a cage. Tameka Ward had been transferred to Jackson Pines just 6 months prior, but it didn't take long for her name to circulate. In a place filled with desperation and dread, Tameka had presence. She was the kind of woman who didn't bow. Inmates whispered that she once ran check fraud like a Fortune 500 CEO. Bold, calculated, and unbothered by the fear that gripped others. That was before she was sentenced to 10 years for orchestrating a scheme that nearly wiped out a local nonprofit and left a trail of debt in its wake. Inside, she wore the orange jumpsuit like armor. Her hair was always neat, her voice sharp. Her laugh? That was what disturbed Elijah the most. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't broken. It was alive. Their first real conversation had taken place in the prison greenhouse. Elijah had approved the horticulture program as a morale booster. Plant something, watch it grow, feel human again. But Tameka didn't seem to care about the tomatoes or the sage. She was too busy watching him. Elijah noticed, and he should have looked away. Should have walked back into his office and buried himself in paperwork. But he didn't. Instead, he stood in the doorframe, arms crossed, and asked, "You like the soil or just the solitude?" Tameka tilted her head, lips curling. "You always ask your inmates philosophical questions, or am I special?" He should have disciplined her for that tone. He didn't. Their interactions became more frequent. Too frequent. She was assigned to the admin wing for clerical duties. Under supervision, of course. But somehow, the supervision always had to take a lunch break, or fill out a form, or step out to take a call. And in those 10-minute intervals of unsupervised silence, something dangerous grew. It started in the eyes. Long stares. Measured glances. Then came the words, carefully chosen, deceptively mundane. "Warden, you ever get tired of pretending?" she once asked while refiling a stack of parole requests. He didn't answer. But that night, he couldn't sleep. At home, Delilah noticed. "You're quiet," she said one evening while folding linens on the edge of their bed. "Long day?" Elijah nodded. "Same as always." But it wasn't, because he'd spent half that day watching the way Tamika's hands moved when she typed. Not in lust, but in fixation. There was something about her control, her defiance. It drew him in, and Tamika knew it. She started to dress differently, within regulation, but just enough to force a second glance. Tighter bun, a smudge of contraband lip gloss, a lower voice when she spoke to him directly. He should have transferred her. But Elijah had a weakness for storms that looked like calm seas. One Thursday, just past noon, she slipped a note beneath his office door. No envelope, no signature, just a sentence. "If this place is your kingdom, why do you look so lost in it?" He didn't confront her. He didn't report her. He folded the paper, slid it into his wallet, and told himself it was a manipulation tactic, that she was trying to leverage her looks, her charm, to get early parole or better conditions. But that's not what it was. It was temptation. In a prison full of liars, cheats, and addicts, Elijah prided himself on being incorruptible. But his resistance was beginning to rot from the inside. Tamika, for all her flaws, saw him. Not the authority figure. Not the community hero. Not Delilah's perfect husband. She saw the man who came to work every day to escape the one place he was supposed to feel peace, his home. Delilah had changed over the years. What once was tenderness had become performance. Their marriage, now 20 years deep, felt like a Sunday service no one really believed in anymore. She baked pies, hosted prayer groups, smiled for the church newsletter. But in private, the silence between them was deeper than any cell block he'd ever walked through. Still, he'd never cheated, never even considered it, until Tamika, one day, as she walked into his office to drop off a file, he closed the door behind her. No cameras in that hallway, no guards nearby, just her, standing in front of his desk, back straight, eyes fixed on his. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. She smiled, not wide, but slow, intentional. "Doing what?" "You know exactly what," he said, stepping closer. "You want something from me." Her voice didn't falter. "I want a taste of freedom. Even if it's just for 5 minutes in a room where someone looks at me like I'm still a woman." Silence. It stretched between them like a wire pulled tight. One spark, and it would snap. He didn't kiss her that day. He didn't touch her. But when she left, he didn't delete her from his mind either. And the next time she walked past his office, he left the door open. For the first time in his career, Elijah Brooks crossed a line he couldn't uncross. What neither of them knew was that prison walls don't just hold inmates. They hold secrets, whispers, shadows, and one of those shadows was already watching. Because inside Jackson Pines, nothing stays hidden for long. And the secret? It was about to birth a lie that couldn't stay buried. Delilah Brooks always said she could feel when a spirit wasn't right. It came like a pressure in her chest, not pain, just a knowing. And lately, her husband's spirit felt like winter. Cold, still, too quiet. She had been married to Elijah for 20 years. Through ministry events, choir rehearsals, PDA meetings, hospital visits, she stood beside him, Bible in hand, smile unshaken. She knew the lines on his face, the rhythm of his breath, the way his voice cracked slightly when he lied. And lately, it cracked more often than not. It began with something small. The cologne. Elijah had always worn a clean, barely there scent, the kind that whispered presence. But now, he came home cloaked in something heavier, richer, something she didn't buy. Then came the night he slipped into the shower without a word, clothes straight into the washer, phone tucked face down. And Delilah, who never believed in coincidences, began to pray harder. But prayer without truth was like preaching with no spirit. One morning, after Elijah left for prison early, too early, she sat in his car to find a gum wrapper from a brand she didn't know. It was wedged beneath the passenger seat, along with burner phone wrapped in a sock. She opened it with trembling fingers. 6 messages, all from a number saved as D. But it wasn't her number. She clicked the latest one. A photo. A newborn swaddled in a peach blanket. Dark curls. The kind of eyes that held secrets even in infancy. Her heart punched against her ribs. The timestamp? Just 2 weeks ago. Delilah dropped the phone, then picked it up again like it was poison she needed to understand. Another message read, "He has your nose. He don't pretend he doesn't." When Elijah got home that night, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She made his plate, poured sweet tea, and watched him chew. Then she slid the phone across the table. Like a contract, she was done negotiating. "What's this?" he asked, eyes not even flickering. "I was hoping you could tell me." His face didn't shift. Not a twitch. "Delilah," he said, his tone molasses and menace, "you've been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe you're seeing things that aren't there. Gaslighting, like flicking off a light, and telling her the dark was her fault." She said nothing, just nodded, excused herself from the table, and wept in the bathroom with the faucet running. 2 days later, she hired a private investigator, not some TV detective, a quiet, calculated woman named Miriam who had once worked missing persons cases in Atlanta. Miriam was discreet, brutal with the truth, and didn't believe in sugarcoating. She delivered receipts. Within a week, Miriam had everything. Security footage of Elijah entering the restricted south wing of the prison after hours. Alone. A falsified medical log authorizing Tameka Ward's early release from infirmary duties. Wire transfers made from a dormant prison operations account to a nurse with no recorded shift that month. The nurse disappeared from payroll the following week. And the most damning, an unregistered vehicle caught on a parking lot camera outside a women's medical clinic. Tamika exiting, visibly pregnant. Elijah pacing by the passenger door. Delilah stood in her kitchen staring at the photos, her knees threatening to betray her. It was worse than sin. It was betrayal in every dimension. Marriage, faith, leadership, flesh. But one thing clawed at her above all else. The baby in the photo, he looked like Elijah did as a child. And somehow, that hurt most of all. She didn't go to the police. Not yet. Instead, she asked Miriam to help her arrange a visit to the prison, disguised as a volunteer chaplain for a new ministry program. It was how she ended up in the prison chapel, face to face with Tameka Ward. Tameka wore no chains, just a white blouse and calm defiance. Her eyes traveled over Delilah like she was reading a menu. "I came to pray with you," Delilah said softly. Tameka smirked. "Pray," she laughed. "For what?" "Forgiveness." Delilah's fingers trembled on the Bible in her lap. "I don't know what you think you have." "Oh, I know exactly what I have," Tameka interrupted. "I have a son, and I have your husband's hands and his curls every Tuesday afternoon." Delilah's voice cracked. "You think this is a victory?" Tameka leaned in. "No, this isn't a game. This is a kingdom. And your king? He left the castle a long time ago." Delilah stood. "You'll regret this." But Tameka only smiled wider. "You're too late." 1 week later, Delilah Brooks vanished. No note, no warning. Her car was found idling near Lake Lanier, driver door open, her phone in the passenger seat, her purse untouched. A church friend who spoke with her the night before said Delilah seemed tired, resigned. Like someone who already made peace with something, she said. Police launched an investigation. Posters were printed. Vigils held. But Elijah, he was calm. Too calm. He gave a televised statement about how strong and devout Delilah had always been, and how he believed she just needed a break. He offered a $20,000 reward for information. He shook hands. He cried at the press conference. A local reporter described him as the image of grief. But Miriam, the PI, wasn't fooled, because bleach had been found in the back of Delilah's trunk. Enough to clean a murder scene, not just a spill. And when she requested a copy of the baby's birth certificate from the Georgia state system, it had vanished. No record of a Tameka Ward giving birth. No infant matching the description. No attending doctor. It was as if the baby and Delilah had been erased. And if someone could do that once, they could do it again. They thought she drowned. The car was parked near the lake, keys still in the ignition, driver's side door cracked just enough for the interior light to flicker and die. Delilah Brooks, beloved church pianist and wife of Georgia State Prison Warden Elijah Brooks, had simply vanished. At least that's what the first responders said. No signs of struggle. No note. Just a quiet, eerie absence that blanketed the town like fog rolling in from the hills. The official theory? Suicide. A broken woman. A drowning widow of her own crumbling marriage. Elijah mourned with just the right balance of restraint and righteousness. Stood at the pulpit 2 Sundays later, eyes glistening beneath the stained glass cross, and thanked the congregation for their prayers. But something about Delilah's disappearance gnawed at the bones of those who knew her best. Why had she left her favorite Bible on the passenger seat? Pages fluttered open to Psalms 109, a cry for vengeance. Why was there bleach in the back of her trunk? And why? When investigators tried to verify her child's birth certificate, had it mysteriously vanished from the Georgia State database. 3 weeks after the disappearance, an anonymous tip came through the sheriff's hotline. An old male voice, raspy, brief, and cryptic. You won't find her in the water. Try the old Monroe place, behind the shed. The Monroe property had belonged to Elijah's late uncle, a recluse who'd passed away years ago, leaving behind acres of overgrown woods, rusted machinery, and an abandoned farmhouse no one had stepped foot in since. On a cloudy Thursday morning, sheriff's deputies and forensic techs arrived with shovels and quiet dread. The shed was rotting, its door hanging crooked like a snapped limb. Inside was nothing but dust, a broken wheelbarrow, and a floorboard that didn't quite fit. They pried it up. Beneath it, a crawl space. And there, wrapped in plastic and a mold-stained white choir robe, was Delilah Brooks. The smell hit first, then the silence. Even the cicadas outside seemed to still. Her hands were folded across her chest, clutching her wedding photo and a black leather-bound Bible that hadn't been opened in years. Her body had been there for at least a week. Autopsy results later confirmed it. Delilah hadn't drowned. She'd been poisoned. High doses of digoxin, a medication rarely used outside of cardiac units, had slowed her heart to a stop. The same drug found in the prison infirmary. The death certificate was quietly amended. At the same time, another break surfaced in Atlanta. A young woman named Latrice Givens had been questioned in an unrelated fraud investigation when she mentioned watching a baby for a friend. The baby, 6 weeks old, light-skinned, dark eyes, and a medical bracelet still clinging to her ankle. When detectives visited the apartment, Latrice folded quickly. She said she was paid in cash by a man in uniform. No name, no receipts. He dropped the baby off in the middle of the night, told her it was temporary, gave her formula, diapers, and a burner phone that stopped working 3 days later. She claimed she didn't ask questions. But when she saw the news about Delilah's disappearance, her stomach turned. I thought maybe he killed the mom, she said. But by then I was scared. I don't want no part of this. The baby was taken into protective custody. DNA would later confirm what everyone already suspected. Elijah Brooks was a father. Back inside the prison walls, Tameka Ward's world was unraveling. The whispers grew louder. Her cell got tossed 3 times in 1 week. Her food came cold, sometimes missing. One of her library shifts was mysteriously reassigned. Her mail tampered with. She knew what was coming. Warden Brooks had stopped speaking to her weeks ago. No glances, no notes, just silence. The kind of silence that stank of endings, deadly ones. That's when she made the decision. She pulled out the old spiral-bound notebook she kept hidden behind a loose brick near her bunk, her diary. Every entry meticulously dated. Every meeting. Every lie. Every time he visited her in the medical wing. She included everything. The false prescription orders he filed to get her alone. The forged medical records used to explain her pregnancy. The threats he made when she said she didn't want to give up the baby. And the night she overheard him talking to someone on the prison phone. She's going to ruin everything. I'll handle it. Tamika slid the diary into a torn manila envelope, addressed it to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and passed it to a sympathetic guard she trusted with her life. For days later, Elijah Brooks stood at the front of Mount Calvary Baptist Church, preaching from the book of Ephesians, his voice rich with conviction, hands raised high in hallelujah. He didn't see the officers until they were already in the aisle. 2 detectives, 1 sheriff, 1 arrest warrant. Elijah Brooks, the lead detective said, "You are under arrest of the murder of Delilah Brooks, conspiracy to conceal evidence, obstruction of justice, and unlawful sexual contact with an inmate." Gasps echoed through the pews. Elijah's hand stayed in the air, as if frozen in worship. His face didn't flinch. Not a twitch, but behind his eyes, something shifted. At booking, he said nothing. At arraignment, he pleaded not guilty. But in court, under the weight of Tamika's diary, wire transfers to a complicit prison nurse, GPS logs showing his midnight trips to the Monroe property, and a digital trail of deleted text messages, the truth began to unravel, layer by layer. He wasn't just a man of God. He was a man of secrets. And one of those secrets had just put him behind bars. But the biggest secret was still the baby, a girl born in chains, now held in limbo. And the world wanted to know, would she ever know the whole truth, or would the system bury her story too? The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that doesn't come from order, but from something deeper, from the weight of truths too sharp to ignore, from the sting of betrayal that no hymn or sermon could smooth over. At the center sat Elijah Brooks, once a revered prison warden, former Marine, husband of 20 years, and pillar of the church. Now, just a man in a wrinkled suit with shackled ankles and eyes that no longer dared to meet the cross on the wall behind the judge. The trial had drawn crowds. Local news, true crime podcasters. Even people from Delilah's old choir group came, some still wearing their Sunday hats, clutching tissues in trembling hands. The prosecution opened with the tape, the surveillance audio recovered from a smuggled wire the PI had placed near the inmate intake area 2 months before Delilah vanished. On it, Elijah's voice was calm, calculated. "If she talks, we both burn. Then let her talk." I said we both burn. Then came Tameka Ward's diary. It wasn't just read, it was performed. The DA had the court clerk read aloud, line by line, page by tear-stained page. June 12th, he smelled like power. That's what pulled me in. Not love, not lust, just power. I hadn't felt anything real in so long. July 4th, he brought me crackers wrapped in a napkin from the warden's office. Said I deserved more than they gave me. I think I smiled. I think I believed him. September 2nd, I told him I was pregnant. He said, "Don't say that again." His whole face changed. October 16th, I saw her. Delilah. She looked straight through me like I was already dead. Then came the witnesses. Delilah's sister took the stand first. Her voice cracked on the first sentence. My sister always said she could feel when a spirit wasn't right. Said it started with Elijah months ago. Said she woke up one night and didn't recognize the man lying next to her. Then the private investigator. Calm, professional, detailed. He presented timelines, receipts, burner phone records, the coordinates of the Monroe property, and the falsified medical log. Next came Latrice Givens, the foster woman paid in cash. She trembled the whole time, but spoke clearly. He gave me the baby and said I'd never hear from him again. I thought I was doing something kind. I didn't know she was gone. And then, perhaps the most shocking of all, a former correctional officer named Yolanda Briggs. She had worked under Elijah for 4 years. She'd seen things she buried deep for the sake of her paycheck, her children, her pension. But when Delilah's body surfaced, she couldn't bury it anymore. I saw him pull inmates out of medical without any nurse present. Saw him pay off a janitor to look the other way. I knew what was happening. We all did. We just didn't have proof until now. The defense scrambled. They leaned into manipulation, seduction, the old trope of the conniving inmate. She seduced him, Elijah's attorney said. She blackmailed him with a fake pregnancy, hoping for a reduced sentence. He was a man, vulnerable, struggling in his marriage, and she exploited that. But the jury didn't buy it, not after the diary. Not after the baby's DNA results. Not after Tamika herself took the stand. She sat there, in her prison uniform, wrists uncuffed for testimony. No tears. No theatrics. Just a quiet strength. I wasn't trying to destroy him. I wasn't trying to save him either. I just wanted to breathe. I wanted to feel like I mattered. But he took everything. Even the air. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder. Sexual misconduct with an inmate. Conspiracy to conceal evidence. Child endangerment. Abuse of power. Elijah Brooks was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, he looked up once. Just once. I tried to be a good man. That was all. No apology. No confession. No mention of Delilah. Outside the courthouse, reactions were split. Some said it was a witch hunt. That a good man was brought down by a desperate woman and a jealous wife. Others said the truth had finally clawed its way out. That Elijah had lived too long behind a mask of morality. Tamika returned to her prison cell. She wasn't offered early release. She didn't ask. But the state awarded custody of her baby, Elijah Jr., to her aunt in Augusta. She sees him twice a month under supervised visitation. He's learning to walk now, has his father's eyes. But when he smiles, people say he looks just like his mother. The final lines of Tameka's diary were quoted by national media. I wasn't looking for love. I was looking for air. He gave me none. That single sentence was framed on the wall of the journalist who broke the story. And Delilah? She was laid to rest under a canopy of magnolia trees, choir robe draped over her coffin. Her gravestone reads, "She sang for the Lord. She died for the truth." The story ends where so many begin, with a woman silenced, another fighting to speak, and a child born into the ruins of two lives. But in one Georgia town, the echo of Delilah's name still lingers in church pews and courtroom halls, a quiet reminder that the mask of a man may crack, but the truth never blinks. If this story moved you, it's time to act. Subscribe to the Family Crime Exposed for more gripping true crime stories where truth hides in plain sight and justice doesn't come easy. Thumbs up, like, share, and comment below. Do you think Tameka was a victim, a survivor, or something more? Man Detective, because behind every family lies a secret worth exposing. Subscribe now. New stories every week. Stay alert. Stay aware.